Ladies and gentlemen, love is perhaps the most complex equation ever written into the human brain. It's an algorithm not of logic, but of longing, one that defies even the greatest minds who try to decode it. And yet, when we look at the world's richest man, a figure surrounded by innovation, technology, and the relentless pursuit of progress, we begin to realize something extraordinary. No amount of intellect, no wealth, no power has ever made love predictable. In a world dominated by artificial intelligence, rocket science, and billion-dollar ideas, it's fascinating how the one thing that still remains untamed, beautifully, painfully human, is emotion. And when you stand at the top of the world, when every move you make is watched, analyzed, dissected, and turned into headlines, love becomes not just a feeling, it becomes a mystery that everyone tries to solve. The richest man in the world, a symbol of innovation and intellect, becomes a canvas onto which society projects its curiosity about human connection. Who does he love? Why does he choose privacy over spectacle? What drives his heart in a world ruled by reason? The romantic mystery surrounding such a person isn't about gossip. It's about understanding something deeper about human nature itself. Because love, for people who live under the constant gaze of the world, becomes both a refuge and a risk. It's a place where the boundaries between vulnerability and strength blur. Neuroscience tells us that when we fall in love, our brain lights up in the same regions activated by deep reward. The ventral tegmental area, the caudate nucleus, the same circuits that drive our hunger for success, for innovation, for discovery. Love, in its raw biological form, is the brain's ultimate motivator. But imagine what happens when a mind already obsessed with creation, invention, and exploration encounters love. The collision between the rational and the emotional, between science and soul, can create both genius and chaos. And perhaps that's why the world's richest man remains such an enigma. Because what fuels him is not just ambition, but emotion buried deep beneath layers of intellect and vision. There's a fascinating paradox here. The more powerful a person becomes, the more their emotional world becomes fragile. The higher you rise, the fewer people you can truly trust. Neuroscientific studies show that social isolation, even mild, changes the way the brain processes empathy and attachment. It's not just loneliness, it's neurological rewiring. When your social environment becomes filtered through fame and power, your ability to experience ordinary love becomes extraordinary in its rarity. And yet, behind every empire, there's an emotional ecosystem. History proves it. From Einstein's letters to his lovers, to Steve Jobs' confessions of solitude, to the way great artists and innovators often seek someone who sees them not as icons, but as human beings. That's the core of this romantic mystery, the richest man in the world, surrounded by machines, rockets, algorithms, and artificial intelligence, still searching for the most ancient intelligence of all, human love. I've often said that the human brain doesn't evolve to chase money or fame. It evolves to chase meaning. And love is the purest form of meaning we know. When we look at individuals who reach the very summit of human achievement, we often forget that behind every strategic decision, every technological breakthrough, there's a deeply emotional mind, one shaped by the same primal forces that drive us all. You see, when you strip away the headlines, the statistics, the fortune rankings, what remains is a human being who still feels the biochemical surge of dopamine at the sound of someone's voice, who still craves oxytocin's calming wave during a touch, who still dreams about belonging in a world that often feels too big to belong to. That's the great irony. The higher the status, the more amplified the isolation. And the deeper the intellect, the harder it becomes to be understood. The richest man in the world doesn't just live in wealth, he lives in complexity. Every relationship, every emotion, every whisper of affection exists under the weight of perception. And perception, my friends, is one of the brain's most powerful forces. It shapes not just how we see others, but how we see ourselves. In neuroscience, we know the prefrontal cortex governs reason, logic, and executive control, while the limbic system governs emotion, instinct, and passion. In most people, these regions learn to cooperate, but in those whose minds are trained to constantly innovate, disrupt, and question reality itself, that balance often collapses. The logical brain overpowers the emotional one, and yet, when love enters the picture, that hierarchy reverses. Suddenly, the person who commands rockets and AI feels powerless in the face of human emotion. Perhaps that's the romantic mystery that fascinates us most, that someone capable of reshaping the future of civilization still wrestles with the same vulnerabilities as the rest of us. It reminds us that beneath every empire lies a heart that still beats with doubt, longing, and wonder. Now, if we step back and look at the biological machinery of attachment, something remarkable emerges. Studies on romantic attachment have shown that love and creativity often share overlapping neural pathways. The same regions that activate during passionate love, the hypothalamus, the nucleus accumbens, are the same regions responsible for drive, focus, and innovation. In other words, love doesn't distract genius, it fuels it. When the world's richest man falls in love, it's not a distraction from his purpose. It's an amplification of it. Every emotion, whether joy or heartbreak, becomes energy converted into vision. It's the law of emotional thermodynamics, nothing is wasted. Every feeling transforms into movement, every connection into momentum. And yet, the public rarely sees that. What they see is distance, secrecy, privacy, control. But perhaps that distance is not arrogance, it's protection. For someone who lives under relentless scrutiny, privacy becomes the last form of freedom. The more the world demands transparency, the more precious mystery becomes. We often mistake mystery for secrecy, but they are not the same. Secrecy hides, mystery reveals selectively. Secrecy is fear, mystery is reverence. In neuroscience, the brain craves mystery because it activates the dopaminergic reward system. It's curiosity, not certainty, that drives us. The same impulse that makes a scientist launch rockets into space is the one that makes him fall in love with someone whose mind he cannot fully map. Think about that. The most advanced mind on Earth, surrounded by data, analytics, and equations, still finds itself captivated not by logic, but by unknowability. Love, for such a person, is not about control but surrender. It's the one domain where prediction fails, and that failure feels divine. There's a poetic symmetry here. The world's richest man builds machines that predict orbits, simulate futures, and map the stars. Yet the one thing he cannot fully understand is the orbit of another human heart. That's not weakness, that's humanity. I often wonder, perhaps the reason people like him seek vastness in space is the same reason they crave connection on Earth. Both are infinite, both are mysterious, and both remind us how small we truly are. When you begin to understand the architecture of the human mind at that level, you realize something extraordinary. The desire to love and be loved is not a luxury, it's a neurological necessity. Even the most rational minds are governed by this quiet code, written deep within the limbic system. A code that predates civilization, predates money, predates every invention we celebrate today. Love is the oldest algorithm in existence, and it cannot be rewritten. No matter how powerful you become, no matter how many worlds you build, the emotional brain still whispers its ancient command: connect. Now imagine living a life where connection becomes a challenge. When every gesture, every glance, every private word risks becoming public currency. When the line between affection and exposure blurs. That's what it means to be both powerful and human. The romantic mystery surrounding someone, like the world's richest man, isn't about who he loves. It's about how he manages to love in a world that wants to consume his every secret. It's easy to assume that great intellects don't need companionship, that their ideas fill the void. But neuroscience paints a different picture. The absence of meaningful emotional bonds triggers the same neural pain circuits as physical injury. The brain doesn't distinguish between heartbreak and broken bones. Both activate the anterior cingulate cortex. Both hurt in ways words cannot describe. So when the world looks at a man who has everything, wealth, vision, legacy, and wonders why his eyes still reflect solitude, the answer lies here. because the human heart was never designed to operate in isolation. It's the ultimate paradox of modern power. The higher you climb, the lonelier the air becomes. History's most brilliant minds often carry an emotional wound, a space carved by isolation and ambition. That wound becomes both a curse and a catalyst. Out of it comes music, art, innovation, and sometimes a love story that defies all logic. Because those who understand the machinery of the universe often find themselves mystified by the machinery of the soul. I've spoken to entrepreneurs, scientists, and visionaries who admit, often quietly, that what drives them isn't just the desire to change the world, but the hope that someone will see them as they truly are. Strip away the titles, the empires, the headlines, and what remains is a human being longing to be known without translation. That longing is what gives their work its depth, its poetry. In neuroscience, we call this the principle of emotional resonance. When the mind experiences deep empathy, when it truly feels seen, the mirror neuron system activates. This network allows us to understand another's emotions not through analysis, but through embodiment. We literally feel the other person's inner state. That's what love really is, the highest form of shared consciousness. And for someone who operates at the cutting edge of technology, surrounded by algorithms that simulate human thought, finding that kind of authentic resonance becomes sacred. Machines can replicate intelligence, but not intimacy. Artificial intelligence can learn patterns, but not passion. That's the essence of the romantic mystery. The richest man on earth, architect of machines that might one day outthink humanity, still chasing something no machine will ever understand: the raw, unfiltered experience of being emotionally understood. There's a reason great thinkers often describe love as energy. Biochemically, they're not wrong. When two people connect deeply, their brain waves synchronize. Studies in neurocoupling show that during deep emotional communication, the rhythms of two brains begin to align. It's as if for a brief moment, two separate consciousnesses operate in harmony. Not metaphorically, but literally. That's what love does. It bridges neural divides that logic alone cannot cross. And when you think about it, this is not so different from the dream of space exploration, reaching for connection across impossible distances. What is love, if not a form of emotional astrophysics? Two minds orbiting each other in infinite darkness, drawn together by gravity neither can resist nor fully explain. But here's where the story deepens. Love, at that scale, requires risk. It demands surrender from those who spend their lives mastering control. And for someone whose every success depends on precision, on predictability, love's chaos can feel terrifying. The human heart doesn't obey blueprints. It expands, it contracts, it breaks, it rebuilds. It's the most unpredictable system we know, and that's what makes it beautiful. To love while standing at the peak of power is to risk everything that power protects. It's to step down from certainty into vulnerability. And yet, it's in that surrender that true humanity reveals itself. The richest man in the world is not richest because of his bank account. He's richest because he still dares to feel, despite knowing how much it can cost. And maybe that's what draws us all toward his story. We see in him the reflection of our own contradictions, the part of us that wants to be both invincible and loved, both untouchable and understood. His mystery is our mirror. We live in a time where people broadcast their emotions for validation, where intimacy is traded for visibility. But when someone powerful chooses silence, chooses privacy, chooses to protect the sanctity of their emotional world, that's not detachment, that's devotion. Mystery in an age of exposure is an act of rebellion. The neuroscience behind that choice is fascinating. When a person prioritizes inner meaning over external reward, their brain's reward system begins to shift. Dopamine, which normally spikes with public approval, begins to respond instead to private connection, personal depth. In simple terms, love, not likes, becomes the true currency of fulfillment. That's why the romantic mystery surrounding the world's richest man resonates so deeply. Because it reawakens something primal within us. It reminds us that even at the summit of human achievement, the heart remains the most powerful engine of all. It reminds us that progress means nothing without presence, that genius without gentleness is incomplete, and that even those who aim for Mars still need someone who keeps them grounded on Earth. There's a beauty in that balance between the infinite and the intimate, between the cosmic and the personal. Perhaps that's what love has always been trying to teach us, that no matter how far we travel, emotionally or scientifically, the destination is never just knowledge, it's connection. And maybe that's the secret the richest man in the world already understands. His life, for all its noise and brilliance, is also a meditation on silence, the silence that comes from knowing that the most valuable discoveries are not found in galaxies or equations, but in the fragile, luminous spaces between two hearts. Love, at its core, is not an achievement. It's a surrender, a willingness to be known, not for what we've built, but for who we are when all that is stripped away. It's the one mystery that refuses to be solved, the one force that humbles even the brightest minds. And that's what makes it eternal. Because in the end, when history looks back, it won't remember just the rockets or the cars or the machines. It will remember the human heart that dared to dream and dared to love, even when the world was watching. And that, my friends, is the true wealth of a man